All right, we're live. Welcome to Dive into World Building. And today we have a really cool guest author who I am introducing verbally, but she cannot hear me today. This is why we're starting a little bit late. We had some technical issues. So what we're going to do is we're going to type her questions, but you should be able to hear her when she speaks. So I'm just explaining to her what I'm saying. And so we're going to get started. Stina has been on the show a couple times before. And she came on to talk about her book of Blood and Honey, which is super, super awesome and involves the Fae in the Troubles in Northern Ireland. It's a super cool book, but we're not going to talk about it today because we've already talked about it. So if you want to go and find out about it, go back to the Hangout reports because there's one there. And but today, let's see, she's also been on to talk about Cold Iron, which is a really interesting book. And today we're going to talk about the sequel to that. So I'm not going to explain Cold Iron all that much. The sequel is called Blackthorne. And so I'm going to say, Stina, can you tell us about the world of Cold Iron and Blackthorne?
Oh gosh, that's long and complicated.
I remember.
Let's see. I
remember her telling us
it's set in the late
in America,
1700s, early 1800s. And let's see. The first book is set in, yeah, kind of, sort of, very vaguely. The thing that this sparked the idea was the idea of Tolkien in America. What would fantasy look like if Tolkien were American? Because I read an essay complaining that most fantasy glorifies feudalism, and it kind of annoyed me because the author in question clearly didn't understand origins of fantasy. They didn't really give fantasy a good. They didn't give it a break. I didn't feel like they made a judgment
yeah.
and just went with it. So
so there are firearms.
Blah, blah, blah. I'm going to ramble. I'm sorry. I didn't get a whole lot of sleep last night. Yes, there are firearms and there are magic. So there are muskets, gunpowder exists, all of that stuff, all the same level. Also, I worked because during that time period, there was a great deal of progress made on the scientific front. So I've also included things like things that you don't normally see, like inoculation against disease was something that definitely came up because during the Revolutionary War, smallpox was a huge problem for the troops. So they inoculated their troops against smallpox. It was like a new thing, brand new thing. So they essentially had and then among the rest of the folks, they had, especially if you were rich, this thing called a pox party, where if somebody came down with a mild case, they would invite them over so that they could. Let me turn off my phone. Sorry. So that everyone would be exposed to a milder case, which didn't always guarantee that the result would be everyone. Yes, that's true. Didn't always guarantee that everybody. I remember those too. It didn't guarantee that everyone was going to get a mild dose, and in fact, there were deaths involved. Because again, this wasn't an exact science in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, so I have included that, and then in the second book, there's a lot of. I got a little squirrely with the dates because actually everything about genetics didn't really come into it until the late 1800s. Yes, it is in fact the beginning of the rifle. So that also comes into the first novel. Well, actually, it doesn't. It comes in the second novel. Rifling comes in the second novel. So, yeah, and in the second novel, I talk a little bit about genetics and eugenics, actually, because the origins of genetics actually are connected. Yeah, no, no kidding. They're actually connected. So the second book is set in Acrasia, which is the quote unquote evil empire, because you have to have an evil empire. And actually, they really are evil, but they don't see themselves as such, which is kind of the ideal way of handling evil characters, really, in my opinion. It gives them more depth if the reader sees them as human beings who make really bad choices.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So, and that's, in my opinion, that's what real evil is. Human beings making really bad choices, being very selfish or lacking empathy. And that's generally where a lot of evil comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to talk a lot about that in the series. Another aspect of the series, and you can tell if you look at the, let me see if there's a map. If you look at the map, aha. I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it?
Yeah, there we go.
It looks a little bit like the United States, and Florida is evil.
Florida's evil.
So basically what I did with, there's an undercurrent. The reason it's called the Malorum Gates is because the Malorum are these entities coming over.
Okay.
Yeah. They're these entities. They're alien, actually. They're coming from a different, what do you call it? Dimension. And they're coming over into this world. And the Malorum basically come in, and they consume everything they come in contact with it, if it has any sort of power. In this world, there's magic, so it makes them even more powerful than they would be. They're just the epitome of consumers. They absorb everything. So
if
in
I
this
remember,
world,
you actually have native peoples who prevent these entities from coming over. And then the invasion of the Acrasians,
yes,
breaks that down. And that causes the rift to be emitting these creatures, right?
yes, yes. Yes.
Yes.
Woo! Sorry.
Communication is working. So that makes it a very interesting examination of the consequences of, I guess, colonialism.
Yes.
Okay. Now, at some point you said to me that this book is meant to stand alone. Is that still true?
Each book stands alone, but you know what? Right now, Cold Iron is on sale for 99 cents on the Kindle. So
okay, so everybody who wants to read this, go get started with Cold Iron. Absolutely.
Oh, let me turn on the AC because it's really hot in here.
Sure.
It shouldn't disturb the conversation because I've got the headphones on.
That's okay. We don't want you to roast.
Yeah, it's like in the hundreds this week.
Oh,
Really unpleasant. Yeah.
Yeah. So
this is the time of year when I'm like, oh God, why am I in Texas?
well, that and election time.
Yes, that too. Absolutely, that too.
Sorry.
I wish.
Yeah.
You don't need to apologize. I wish.
Okay, so, all right. Tell us about Acrasia and how it works. What we learn in book 2.
Yes. Okay. Acrasia is it's loosely based on a Roman background. So, and they came to the country, came to this continent as refugees because their homeland was, it went away via volcano. Because I love Pompeii. Well, you know what I mean. So they came to and they're very imperial, so they go in and they invade other countries and like take over. The problem that they're facing is the fact that the way magic works, it works a little too well on human beings. And Canaan, or the elves, as it were, they have each individual has their own type of power, just like everybody has their own talent. And the royalty in Elidor generally have this thing called command magic, which is what you find in book 1. That's what you find out in book 1. And in book 1, part of what contributes to the nation's, I guess I'm giving it away if I say the nation's fallen. What contributes to the nation's downfall is the fact that the Elidorian royalty have abused their powers to influence Acrasians that come to Elidor. There are other Canaan and other nations, and not all of them have this relationship with humans. But in particular, that one was abusive. So the Acrasians are terrified of magic, and therefore they outlaw it, essentially. And they try to control any Canaan in their midst, absolutely. And their whole goal is to destroy magic.
Wow.
Even though you come to discover that the Malorum have actually invaded Acrasia so much that the Malorum have the run of the city at night. So they have a curfew, everything shuts down. And we have 2 groups of, I guess, people who uphold the law. There's one group called the Brotherhood of Wardens, and the other who are the Watch. And the Watch interact with like the common people and make sure that everybody is inside and safe. And the Wardens generally interact with the nobility and the rich. So that's how that's set up, because they have their own separate law. Because in Acrasia, the wealthy pretty much have the run of everything. It's a very capitalistic society.
Okay.
What's your question?
You said that Acrasia had a problem with volcanoes. So if they're going back,
Their homeland did.
that work. They're going to another.
They're not going back. Are they going to another? They're invading other countries to take their territory over.
Okay.
If you see the map, you see the map. They're basically in Florida. And they're just going. This is Elidor.
Okay.
They've invaded all of this, and then they're spreading out elsewhere.
Okay.
Oh, and one more thing. So, yeah, that's all right. It's kind of, like I said, it's pretty complex. Because it's an epic fantasy, you can't really do an elevator pitch. I kind of dislike that about it, because everything is just so interwoven. Since every group of their magic works differently, in Elidor, magic is more, their magic, the Elidorians, their magic works better on land. Then we have the Waterborn, and the Waterborn generally live on the sea in ships. And their magic works really, really well on the ocean. So for that reason, they actually have power over all the oceans, all the surrounding oceans. So if anybody wants to like hop into a ship and just go, they have to deal with the Waterborn.
Sure, that makes sense.
So in a way, the Acrasians are trapped.
They're like,
yes, they're the dominating navy. But they don't see themselves. They don't. I'm just going to blurt this out. They are basically Star Trek in wooden ships. They're the Federation of Planets in wooden ships. Yes, monopolies are exactly what I had in mind.
In fact,
because monopolies were totally a thing at that time. Yes, they still are.
I think she said this was inspired by the East India Company.
Yes, the East India Company at the very start. I thought of the East India Company, only not evil.
Only not evil. Okay, cool.
But then over time that developed, I was like, well, that would be, yeah. Then I thought, well, this is actually really the Federation of Planets, only wooden ships. That works better.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. How would they respond to finding volcanoes in their new world?
I only ask because
they probably wouldn't hang around. Taboo? No, I haven't. Is that something I should?
No.
Okay, I'll look into it.
I haven't watched it either, so I don't know. What's the relevance here, Che?
It involves this guy coming back from Africa and basically trying to shove it to the East India Company in early 1800s England, and it's this huge set of power plays, colonial America, gunpowder plots, revenge,
do you know if it's on Netflix?
A vague hint of magic. Not yet, no. It aired on FX.
This sounds like William
that sounds right up my
East
alley.
India Company in Africa.
Oh, where is it?
It's bananas. It's absolutely bananas.
All right.
I wonder if it's on Hulu, because I've got that too.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
I'm still stuck on Not Evil East India Company.
Well, that's where it started.
Yeah. I mean, So I guess you could say, how much evil is there in just monopolizing, right?
Let's go back to how much evil is there in the fact that the East India Company is extracting goods from a nation whose native people are not benefiting at all from the extraction. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily be any better if 15 different Western companies were exploiting India all at the same time.
Yeah.
The question went away. I got as far as, I read a little slow, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay. I'm
dyslexic, so it takes me a minute to. Right. I made sure that the waterborne are not exploiting people as they go. I made sure of that. I wanted to give them a prime directive, as it were.
Okay,
that's why they interact with each nation ethically, and trade with nations ethically. That was one of my goals. That's like the Federation.
It's no wonder you changed your.
The funny thing is, the Acrasians called them
you
pirates.
The model? Acrasians called them what again?
Pirates.
Pirates.
They call them pirates. Why? Because they operate differently, and than the Acrasians do, and because most often, once they hit a market, become involved in a market, the Acrasians can no longer take advantage of that market because naturally no one would want to deal with them if that's their attitude, right? So
the Acrasian framing is that they are being robbed from? Alexandra, I am on a podcast. Bye-bye.
Yes, they do. Well, there's a certain amount of entitlement that goes along with that whole empire thing, right?
Right.
So, can you explain the plot of?
It was one of the things I was going for, was the conflict of philosophies. Oh, good Lord. There are several different plot threads going on. One of them involves a murder mystery and a serial killer. Because if you live in a society where everything is legal, provided you have the money to pay for it, and that means that the rich pretty much do whatever they damn well please, including legalized murder.
Wow. And what society is this particularly?
This is Acrasia.
Okay.
Yeah. The second book is set in Acrasia. The first book is set in Elidor. The second book is set in Acrasia for the most part. It's also another plot line that's going on is Nels and Suvi and Victor and those guys are trying to revive Elidor. So they have a place where everyone is hiding from the Acrasians, and they're trying to reestablish the kingdom.
Okay.
So there's that plot going on, and they're smuggling Canaan out of Acrasia, and of course, Acrasia is declaring that Elidorians don't exist anymore because that's even though they have them living amongst them.
So is Acrasia the Florida one?
is the Florida?
Yeah.
Oh yes, on the map it is. No,
Okay.
it's the Florida section.
Okay. I was wondering.
Yeah, they're stuck on a peninsula, which means they can't explore on the ocean, so they're trying to force their way
Oh,
onto
I
the rest
see.
of the continent.
So the volcano forces them up onto the main continent.
So let me think. What are the other plot lines going on? Oh, the volcano is on a totally different continent.
Oh.
That happened probably 100 years before.
Okay, that
So
clarifies.
they've been there for quite a while. Yes, sorry about that.
Yeah, so they've
Sorry
been on
about
this
that.
peninsula
Like I said, I haven't had a whole lot of sleep.
hundreds of.
Oh, they've been there for at least 100 years.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Enough that for them that history is kind of foggy. So let me think about the plot line. So there's the plot that's going on in New Elador. Then there's the plot that's going on in Acrasia, which involves the murder mystery. Then there's Blackthorne, who is smuggling. He's a person of color, but he's been passing as white. But he's smuggling Canaan out of the country to New Elador. So there's that aspect of what's going on and his whole story. Then there's another point of view, Caius. And Caius is a warden. He's a new warden. And from that perspective, the way I look at it, we have Drake, and she's Captain Drake. She's part of she's a watch captain, and she's an alcoholic, but she's a fiercely independent woman. And the way I look at her is she's not really a good person, but she's in what people would consider a typically good person kind of job. And Caius is a good person who is in a, well, just straight up evil kind of job. And part of that plot line between those two is Caius discovering that, hey, this shit's awful. Why am I doing this? I need to get out of this.
Yeah.
And Drake just being Drake. I thought she was a lot of fun, actually, because you don't often get to see women in a complex way on the page. So her character's really interesting, I think.
Okay. All right. I'm curious about people of color. How prevalent are they, and how is their identity different? If at all.
I purposely didn't make their identity that different.
Okay.
I tried to keep the main prejudice to having to do with magic and less about skin color, although Acrasia being Acrasia, they're just bigots. So anything that they can point out that somebody is different, they totally will. One of the things to keep in mind in this series was I used a lot of terminology that you find in fantasy when you're talking about fairies, because the Eladorians are elves, basically. So, which is why New Elador is underground, for example.
Oh, okay.
And it's in, yeah. So I did a lot of hidden stuff like that. I didn't call it out, but there's a lot of that in there.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. But among Eladorians and the Atlane, there's no difference.
So wait, I'd like a clarification there because I'm not clear. Does that mean that
They're underground in Elador?
Okay. Okay.
So you have subterranean people and you have not subterranean people, but are all of your subterranean people the same complexion?
I don't think they were originally subterranean. I got a spell.
No, they don't. Because they weren't originally subterranean. Yes,
So
they do.
the
Very much so.
Okay, so the
They come from all over the continent.
Okay.
Because originally when the Malorum came to this world, everyone fled to where the rockiest land they could find. And since, if you look on the map, Elador has a lot of mountains. It's very, very mountainous. So everyone fled from all parts of the continent and came to Elador. And then once the Malorum problem was resolved, they spread out again.
Ah.
Mostly I'm curious, because I get asked about these things, how you described your characters to differentiate them from each other, and whether their physical characteristics were different, and whether your major groups were different, not just in the larger cultural sense, but in this more individual sense. To go to Star Trek, since we introduced Star Trek, Scotty gets to be Scottish, but a lot of characters of color don't get to be their ethnicities.
Okay. I'm going to try to give her an example.
I do. It depends on what point of view you're in. I do mention. It depends on who is the point of view, who's the point of view person. But I do. The skin colors is mentioned in that if someone who happens to be brown is speaking with somebody who happens to be white, they will notice the difference. If I'm speaking from the brown person's point of view, they will notice, oh my gosh, that's a white person. You know what I mean? And then if it's another brown person, less so. I try to differentiate that way. Also, there are, for example, Blackthorne's mother comes from Marin, and while he wasn't raised in Marin, his mother was captured while she was pregnant. That is part of his heritage, if that makes sense. A lot more of that is brought out with the Waterborn, because the Waterborn welcome all the cultural differences. So that is more often explored there, and I've always intended to eventually move more into that part of the world. That's where the third book was supposed to be set, but that's going to be delayed, unfortunately. I'm sure, I'm dead certain that I have screwed up somewhere on this. Yes, the third book's delayed, sadly. they wanted something different. My publisher wanted something different from me in the meantime, because science fiction is hot. So I'm going to write a science fiction book in the meantime. But I do plan on releasing some short stories about the waterborne.
Nice.
But anyway, I just, again, I know beyond a shadow, I did my very, very best. I took workshops about writing the other.
Okay. That's a great
took
workshop.
multiple workshops and read multiple books. I did my very, very best, but I am dead certain I have messed up somewhere. And I apologize for that.
Thank you for trying, and thank you for being
It
able to
is
say that you
hard.
put in the hours.
But I think
That's
it's important to accept responsibility when you screw up. But it's also important to do the homework. When I wrote my first book of Blood and Honey, I set it in Northern Ireland, and I hadn't at that time been to Northern Ireland. I have since, but I made a 5-year study, and I put a lot of effort in finding out as much as I could about the Troubles, and it paid off. As a result, there was a Dublin book group at the time when I first wrote the book. I didn't expect anyone outside of like 5 people that I knew would ever read that book. And the next thing I know, the book made a big splash, and people in Dublin were reading it, and I was terrified.
Yeah.
Absolutely terrified. But interestingly enough, they thought I was a native, so it paid off. The research, and I'm having the same terror right now because I have, characters of color, and it's part. You can't not do that. It's part of your job as a writer, is to portray all sorts of different characters. And if they're all exactly like you, that's a boring story. Never mind, it's not realistic. So,
Yeah.
But again, when you screw up and you're called on it, it's important to apologize straight up.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I do sensitivity
that was my
readings.
intention. So the third book would be set among the waterborne.
Yeah, I do sensitivity readings, and I'm writing fiction now, and I'm terrified, because if I screw up, I look extra bad. So yeah, no, I have every sympathy for trying and being aware that it's very probable that something is not right.
It's scary, but it's nothing about it is comfortable. Nothing about it is comfortable. That is not a comfortable conversation, but it has to happen. It has to. Ignoring doesn't change anything.
Yeah, comfort isn't the goal, right?
Exactly.
So, look,
No.
I think we should wrap up here.
Sounds good.
So I'm going to ask the discussants.
I didn't get to talk about Dylan and Dar.
Oh, it sounds like maybe Stina has something to say. Okay, so would you guys rather?
Yeah, sure.
Would you guys rather ask her questions about Blackthorne, or would you rather talk about the new thing? Because she has a new thing I think she wants to talk about.
Let's hear about the new thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tell us
new thing.
about your new thing.
Oh, the new thing.
Or
Okay. That one does have an elevator pitch.
Ooh.
I'll just mention the new novel first. Okay, so basically it's 7 samurai, gender flipped, set in space, right, with 6 women of color and 1 white woman who never speaks.
okay.
There's also one of the 6 women of color is an illegal AI.
Okay.
Double whammy.
Yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with it. Largely because I'm doing a lot of call outs to, like, I don't know if you're aware, but Magnificent Seven is the same same plot as the Seven Samurai. Just like Yojimbo is the same plot as what's the first in that series? Fistful of Dollars. It's the same. So I'm watching a lot of westerns and all spaghetti westerns, and then I'm also Tombstone also because I love Tombstone. Who doesn't? But so I'm making all these different call outs, like their spaceship. I mean, their drop ship is the name of it is Kurosawa. Thank you. I love samurai movies, by the way. Ooh, that sounds cool.
Cool. So I thought I misunderstood.
So back to Blackthorne for a second.
Yeah.
I wanted to mention that we have Dylan is a point of view character in the second book. You meet him in the first one, but he's one of the Scoobies, but he's not a point of view character so much in that book. He is in this one, and he's gay, so he and his lover are involved. So Dylan and Dar, and I tried to if a character's and then there's also Slate, who is one of the leaders of the movement in New Eldor. He's a former Acrasian. He's blind, and he's also a spy master. And bisexual, because, I think it's kind of silly to just give someone... Everybody has multiple cultural and just multiple layers of backgrounds to them. And I think it's kind of silly to only give people, characters, just one. Layered identities, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love the idea of a blind spy master. He gets his messages back and forth from Acrasia via things like lace, tactile messages that people don't. I mean, the whole point of being a spy is nobody notices you, and older women are not usually noticed in Acrasia. So passing messages back and forth via lace, or there's a toy maker who uses the toys. So whenever someone from New Eldor travels, his name is Slate.
Slate.
I named him Slate because he's a former professor.
Okay. I think we're at the end of the hour.
Yeah. That was fun. Thank you.
You're so very welcome. Thanks for having me. Oh, you are too.
But this sounds really cool. So we're going to look out for your books when we go out.
Yay! Thanks so much.
Yeah, no, it's really a pleasure to have you. And I think what I'm going to do at this point is stop the broadcast. Though we are going to meet next. What's the date next Wednesday? Do you guys know?
Next Wednesday is the 2nd of August.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, so we are going to meet then. My mom's coming into town, so I'm going to have to kind of squidgy things when I'm with my mom here. But but
Cool.
we'll work it out. But in the meantime, next week is a definite go at 10 a.m. on Wednesday.
Do we have a topic?
Do we have a topic? Well, I got so excited about translation and interpreters. Is there a possibility we could do that one?
We can do translation and interpreters, yes.
Okay, so that's our topic for next week.
I like that.
Sounds like fun.
Yeah, that'll be really cool.
Okay.
I wish I could get Ken Liu to stop in.
Oh, man.
But yeah. So maybe I can see if there are people who are willing to stop in who are translators or interpreters.
I will put a call out and see what people say.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens. All right. Sounds good.
Okay.
Thanks, Juliet.
Thank you so much, Stina. It was
Bye.
great for
Very
you to make it on zero notice.